Hi, Steve Sandner here, and I want to talk about one of my musical mentors, Clark Terry, jazz trumpet player, who was a big influence in my musical education and my musical influence in jazz. Right now I'm driving 200 miles each way to my gig. That's what happens sometimes. But I was thinking about Clark Terry, who I met when I was in high school. And he gave me a little tip about improvising. I asked him a question. I said, well, what do you think about when you're improvising? And he said, the melody. And that was such a straightforward answer. He didn't say you think about the chords, or you think about the harmonic structure, or you think about the arpeggios or scales or something like this. No, he said you think about the melody. Well, that was reinforced a few years later when I was at Berklee School of Music, and we were playing a somewhat complex piece with a small group ensemble. And the alto player was just a fantastic player, a little bit older than me, and he was very well studied, but he was playing his solo, and it didn't seem to have quite the zip that you thought it should have, and he knew it, and we knew it, and the instructor just said, well, why don't you just relax, think about the melody, and improvise off of that approach. And so the next time we played it, the sax player, sure enough, played this great solo using that same concept that Clark Terry had mentioned to me. End of my senior year in high school, I was offered 3 scholarships, 2 to go to jazz camps. I think one was in Wisconsin, and I can't remember where the other one was. The 3rd scholarship was Berklee School of Music out in Boston, to go to their summer session there. Now that was the gold standard to me at the time, and that was the scholarship I'd worked hard to apply for and to send in audition recordings and getting references, that kind of thing. That was the scholarship that I really wanted to take. Well, during my senior year, when I was hanging out with Clark Terry, he loved to hang out with the kids and the students, and we would just hang out and chat with them, and he would just be friends with us. And I never would have said this myself, but somebody standing near me said, hey, Steve here was offered 3 jazz scholarships. Clark Terry looked at me, was very, very interested, very pleased, like I was one of his boys, that I had done well. It was a great feeling to be noticed like that, Mr. Clark Terry. Well, if you listen to his recordings, he recorded a great album with Oscar Peterson Trio. And before that, he had played with Count Basie, Duke Ellington, made a name for himself playing on The Tonight Show when Johnny Carson was hosting The Tonight Show. Sometimes he would play a solo, be featured during the show. He also had a little novelty song he did called Mumbles, where he would kind of scat in a mumbling style these great jazz licks. And so as a singer, he was very proficient, not only as a trumpet player. I don't know what else he sang, but I know he sang that song Mumbles, and it was just a big hit with some of my buddies who were my jazz friends in high school. And I also saw Marcus Belgrave do that with him later on in Detroit. I met Clark Terry at the African American Center in downtown Detroit, and this concert with Marcus Belgrave, I got to sit in the front row next to one of Clark Terry's sisters, I believe. It was one of his family members, and I mentioned that Clark Terry was a big influence on my musical career and my life as a musician, and she thought that was great, and she took me by the hand backstage to talk with Clark Terry afterwards, and I told him he was a big influence, and I thanked him for all the help he had given me along the way. And he was very generous with his time with students. He could have been out probably making money on concerts or recording sessions or something, but he was very generous spending his time with us young students. And I said I really appreciated that, and I ended up becoming a professional musician. He was just happy and beaming to hear this and chat with me, and I got to chat with him a little while. Then a couple of years ago, a movie came out called Keep On Keeping On, and it was a documentary about Clark Terry. Clark Terry and a young student of his. And I saw it, I think in 2015 at the Sedona Jazz Festival. And I don't often actually go to the movies. And especially I don't often get emotional. And I have to admit I cried during this movie. It showed Clark Terry in the later years of his life when his health was kind of waning, and he was still the magnificent teacher with this young student who was a piano player. And it was just a very poignant movie, and I wish I could play some of his music during my video, but I'll have to try to find some links to some of his pieces and put them below the video. But it's nice to think of some memories of Clark Terry and the fantastic instrumentalist he was. My favorite jazz trumpet player, possibly my favorite jazz instrumentalist. And there are a lot of great jazz trumpet players out there, don't forget. We've got Miles Davis, Dizzy Gillespie, Wynton Marsalis. You could go on and on, Freddie Hubbard. There are just many, many great trumpet players. For some reason, Clark Terry just had a spark and a flair. He could play expressively. He could play the blues. At the high school demonstration, he played a passage from a Stravinsky piece that was fairly well known. I forget which piece, and he just played it with precision and exactitude. And then he could play the blues expressively. He could play technical phrases with a lot of notes that would just be amazing. So I just love Clark Terry. God rest his soul. So thank you for listening to my memories of Clark Terry.